Welcome everyone to the second installment of Talent Wars. My name is Len Perna. I'm the chairman and CEO of TurnkeyZRG, which is a talent and executive recruiting firm in sports, music, entertainment, and media. Part of the ZRG companies. I'm delighted to be joined today by Sola Winley, who is not only an amazing story, but is a friend and is a person who is driving change in the sports industry and beyond. I'm going to let Sola talk a little bit about his background, and then we're going to get into his life force philosophy and also talk about why talent is one of the primary differentiators in winning and losing, not only on the field, but also in the front office. Sola, welcome. Really glad to have you.
Len, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Excited to join the discussion today. Thank you so much.
Let's just start with a quick background of where you've come from and what you're currently doing.
Sure. I'm often asked that question, Len, and how I start is it's never a linear process to get to the current moment that you're in. Some folks actually think about, the fact that they want to be and fulfill a certain role. I never had that desire to do a specific role. My energy has always been directed towards having an impact in people's lives. And so I started my career with the NFL as a young kid, coming out of school. I had a graduate degree in sports marketing. I did an internship with the Knicks, and that led to a job offer by the University of Connecticut, where I graduated from. And I was set and intent to take that job. And then a company that I had interviewed with didn't get a role. They didn't have an opening. Host Communications let me know that the NFL was hiring. And so I went in. It was like 6 or 7 interviews later. My current boss, who's the commissioner of Major League Soccer, Don Garber, was my boss then. It led the events department. And I helped to create grassroots programs domestically. One that's still in existence that I coach my son in, NFL Flag. Had a chance to run the NFL's sales business in London, and I ended up turning that job down. And I had, at that point in time, I'd worked for the NFL for 7 years, and decided to go back to social work school. This was after the NFL was generous to pay for my MBA. And then I, opened up a practice for 15 years, ran my own business called Provision Consulting, anchored around the notion that it's people, right, to your point, talent, that powers progress and that powers corporations. And so I had clients who would come see me in an office, and I would go to clients' offices and corporations across a variety of different industries. And one of my clients ended up hiring me, A&E Networks, which is a multi-channel cable company. I worked there as the executive vice president of corporate strategy and planning. It was a terrific run for 5 years between 2013, 2018. And then left there in 2018, opened up my practice again. Major League Soccer was one of my clients. And then George Floyd was murdered in 2020. And the commissioner called, and Joanne Neal called, who oversees the league's administration, who I had a relationship with as well. And they asked if I'd be interested in taking that role. And I don't have a traditional DEI background. I really more fashion myself as somebody who understands the complexity of organizations, the dynamics of human beings, and some of the challenges that get in the way of trying to change institutions and systems. And I talked about it with my kids. We sat down at the table. I said, this is the opportunity. It's going to mean some changes in how we interact as a family. And my kids said, my 2 older ones said to me, Dad, you've always talked to us about having an impact in people's lives. The job sounds fun. If you could, align those 2 things, we think you should do it. And so with their blessing, I joined the league in 2021. It's been 2 years, and really pleased with the progress that we've been able to make as an organization, some of the impact that we've been able to have in people's lives. And setting an example for what's possible, not just in soccer, but across the sports industry. We take that very seriously.
Sola, one of the things that really stands out about you, and the reason why we wanted to talk with you today, is because you don't have a normal DEI background. You're a business person. You're a strategy person. You've driven revenue. You've run businesses. And to me, that is really the critical thing that makes you successful when you think about what your current role is and how you're trying to implement that across all the businesses of MLS. Talk about that and how that gives you an advantage in doing what you need to do now that you understand the underlying business.
Yeah, I might phrase it a little bit differently, Len. I'm not sure that it necessarily gives me an advantage as much as it does gives me a broader perspective, and allows me to look and broaden my aperture, right, to understand of what's essential to a business, right? And so there's no business if we're not making revenue. And there's no business out there, right, that's not looking to grow their revenue and expand their reach. And how to do that, right? You do that by attracting more customers, attracting more fans. We live in a diverse marketplace. And so there's just a natural synergy there, right? That if we want more fans to come to our stadiums, if we're interested in having more fans subscribe to our Apple Season Pass, that means that we have to create a product and create an environment where people feel welcome to spend time with us, right? Where they feel like they belong, they feel like there's folks that represent their interests, and we have an opportunity here just based on some of the principles of Major League Soccer. We have players who come from 86 different nations. We have a diverse coaching pool. We have one of the most diverse fan bases and youngest fan bases in all of sports. And so we already have a built-in foundation to integrate diversity, equity, inclusion into all that we do. Often when we talk about DEI, it's through the perspective of doing good and social causes. And we look to reshape that a little bit. Certainly we want to have impact, but we want to drive a value for the enterprise, value for our clubs. And we believe that great corporations do good. And it's goodness that's at the root of all that we're doing. Our aspiration as a DEI group, and what we try to infuse, is the aspiration of being a beloved soccer community, modeled off of the aspiration of Martin Luther King, where people felt a sense of dignity and respect, where there's an opportunity to participate and share in wealth equity, and where there is an absence of discrimination. And that work has to take place every day. And so it's a fully concentrated effort across the enterprise, from our ownership on down to folks who just come into our office for the first time. We have a very robust ERG program. We have 7 employee resource groups at the organization that really form a foundation for culture. So when new employees come into the organization, they're exposed to an opportunity for them to connect with a community that represents their needs. We rely on that group, not just for community building, but also to help us understand some of the business dynamics that we're looking to address, whether that's some of our marketing campaigns, or how we address certain issues or talk to certain customer segments. So it's an integrated approach to what we do.
I mean, it seems to me that the key to success is having somebody at the very top. So I'm talking about Commissioner Don Garber, Joanne Neal, even the board, be driving this from the top, where you can be infused into all parts of the business. There's no parts of the business that you can't have an impact on. And as you look around our industry, do you see other organizations doing what you are doing in terms of giving somebody with a role like this access to all parts of the business to drive it as a business?
I can't speak for other organizations. I don't really have a lens into how they operate. If I look at the sports industry in general, we're all trying to move the industry forward and become more inclusive. When I talk to my peers across the industry, everybody's working very hard. I think there's been significant progress that's being made. Of course, and we hear it often, that there's still more to do. There's always more to do. I think people were often looking for, okay, what's the finish line here, right? Okay, we've accomplished something. Life is continuous. There's no end point here, right? And so we make as much progress as we can every day. We do that with a sense of intentionality. I think we have a unique opportunity with Major League Soccer, particularly given the fact that we have World Cup coming up. There's a big stage and platform. We're excited. We just announced our 30th team yesterday in San Diego, right, which talks to the interest in our sport, the growing nature of the fact that more and more people are playing soccer, wanting to engage in soccer. And that's an opportunity that we look to take full advantage of. And so it's less about what I personally, can do. Most DEI groups have limited resources and have limited personnel. And so successful DEI programs are really decentralized and owned by the business leaders. And it has to be driven by the business leaders, right? And so it's impossible for a group of 3 or 4 people to figure out what an entire enterprise should be doing, managing all of the different dynamics for that enterprise from a inclusion perspective. And so it's really required that senior leaders not only buy into it, but that the entire organization is bought into it, because just given the fact that resources are limited for this area, and they will continue to be.
Talk about some of the wins, maybe 1 or 2 big wins, since you've gotten there, of things that you could point to where you're really super proud of the way the ball has been moved forward.
Sure, there's several of them. I'll start first with something that's in the public sort of zeitgeist, right? Is what's happening with opportunities for head coaches and front office staff of color. And most people are familiar with the Rooney Rule. We have a version that we instituted in 2007. At the time, it was called a Diversity Hiring Initiative. We have enhanced that policy. It's now our diversity hiring policy. We spent over 300 hours as an organization, from owners to current and former coaches, league executives, examining the policy. We got unanimous approval from the board at the end of 2021. We rolled out that policy in 2022. And very, very thrilled that we were able to get that over the finish line. First year after last year, 2022 season, 51% of the hires in Major League Soccer on the technical side, which includes our academies, MLS academies, where it's everything from youth from 14 up to 19, and our first team. Over 51% of those hires were from underrepresented groups.
I mean, there's a lot of sports that would love to have that. I mean, that is a fantastic. I know we want to do more, but that is a big win.
It's a terrific start, right? And when we talk about 51%, right? It's a great number, Len, but there's lives that are impacted there, right? Real people represent that 51%. People who, before the policy and before some of the programs that we rolled out, may have felt that there wasn't an opportunity for them to even compete for those roles. And so we just open up opportunities, reduce barriers to access, to give people a chance to compete for roles. And if you give people an equal footing to compete for a role, then the best person will get that job. I feel confident about that. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we create networking spaces for people to meet one another, that we properly prepare and train people for these jobs so that they can go out and compete to the best of their ability. You mentioned Commissioner Garber, and he likes to say that we are a league of choice. And that's a very powerful statement, right? Because when you look at talent has a choice of where they want to work, right? Talent has a choice of where they want to contribute their skills. We all volunteer our time at organizations. Sure, we're compensated. Most of us are not under contract. And so to be a league of choice means we have to have a culture, right, where people feel that there's an opportunity for them to compete at the highest level, to make a contribution, both on and off the pitch. We also launched last year a third division league, MLS Next Pro, which our policy rolled out there. And 65% of those hires went to underrepresented candidates, which is an extraordinary number. And so the more people we can populate into the system with not just diverse demographic backgrounds, Len, but also diverse experiences, right? Different coaching experiences, the better that we're going to be. And so we're excited about what we've accomplished, but also even more excited about what lies ahead.
I mean, the fundamental premise of Talent Wars is that talent in and of itself, and in particular, diverse talent, is the most important factor, whether you're building a team on the pitch, whether you're building a team in the front office, wherever it is, looking for that talent, the ways you use to look for that talent. Are you using inclusive practices to find that talent? So the fundamental premise is that's the difference between winning and losing. That's the difference between being a successful organization and not. Give me your philosophy of this, because you're definitely in the talent space. You're a leader in that space. Do you agree with the fundamental proposition? And just talk to me about your philosophy of talent.
Sure. I think that first and foremost, you have to be competent, right? It doesn't matter what your nationality is, what your ethnic makeup is you have to have a level of competence. And so I look for that first and foremost. Is an individual competent? Second is character, and can I trust, and can we trust the judgment of people, particularly when we're dealing with complex issues, right? That we have to be able to ensure that people's judgment is sound. I want to take it away a little bit from a theoretical notion of the value of inclusivity, right? Let's break it down. Let's look at sports, right? And so any successful sports team, right, has a diversity and has inclusion, and it might not be racial diversity, right? But you have some people who are good strikers. You have some people who are meant to be goalies, right? You have some people who are great 3-point shooters, and some people who are great dunkers and dribblers, passers and catchers. And so we each bring a unique skill set. And so if we were all sort of singularly focused and single skilled, I'm not sure that you'd have a very successful team, right? And so when you're looking to build a business, then it just makes intuitive sense, right? It's just practical that you would get a better result and better product if you have an inclusive group trying to solve what that problem is, right? Because we're all looking at the same opportunity, the same challenge, but from a different perspective. And that's what leaders value, right? So when what contribution can I make to the commissioner, right? The commissioner takes a variety of different views from a variety of different perspectives, whether that's from somebody who's running HR, somebody who's running our commercial business, somebody who's running our media business, or our finance business. All of us come to the table, and the commissioner benefits from hearing a variety of different perspectives. Ultimately, he has to make the best decision. And so we sometimes make it a bit too complicated, I think, Len, right? It's very simple, and just look at it in one's own life, right? If you have children, look at their sports teams, you have different levels of skill set on the team. And if we could stop thinking so much about it and just open ourselves up to what the experience of our own existence actually is, I think that we'll see that we probably make it more complicated than it needs to be.
Talk about a little bit unconscious bias and the things that you have done within the realm of MLS for people to understand, because we all have blind spots. And so what kinds of things have you done to make sure that people can at least identify their own unconscious bias?
Sure. First and foremost, it starts with listening. You know, that I think we all have an opportunity to become better listeners, and we tend to come into a discussion and conversation with a preset idea and expectation of what the outcome should be, and we often view people and circumstances and situations by what we see, right? And so it's very difficult to judge somebody based on appearance, for example. So we've rolled out a host of training programs. I think that they were very well received. But this notion of unconscious bias is an important one. We all have it, right? It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. It doesn't matter what your title or your role is. And in fact, the most powerful tool that any of us have is the ability to become conscious, to become aware, right, of who and how we are, how we're interacting, right? And that's the notion of being self-aware and being mindful in the moment. And if you're mindful in the moment, in fact, you start to see that unconscious bias begins to dissolve, because it's not a thought exercise, right? We're just rooted here in the present moment. And in this present moment, Len, is an opportunity where all of the magic happens, all of the opportunities happen, right? The problems begin to exist when we begin to think about them, right? When we begin to analyze and assess them. and make a story up in our minds. And so each and every one of us can practice every day to be a little bit more aware, right? That we can close our eyes, we can sit for a few minutes, right? We can become more mindful of the thoughts in our head. We can become more mindful of that voice, right? That is analyzing, that's judging, that's assessing things. And we can learn to detach from that a little bit and begin to ask ourselves, should I be listening to that voice? Is it true? Because if we're listening to the voice in our head, then we're not listening to who's trying to communicate with us, which means that we're shut off from receiving some very vital information, both spoken and unspoken.
I want to sort of move, away from MLS now and just talk about Sola. I want to understand your life philosophy, how you approach life. You've had so many different experiences across your life. Just give us a sense for your view of life and where you are today. And we'll have a lot of HR and DEI professionals listening to this. Maybe insights for them in terms of how you attack each day.
Yeah, I'm not sure I attack each day as much as I allow and have learned, right, the power in allowing the day to unfold, right. I think that we are conditioned, Len, to believe that we are in complete control of the outcome of things, and I have learned, as most of us have,
we're not
that we're
in
not,
complete control.
right? That none of us could have predicted a global pandemic, right? That none of us know how the rest of the day is going to turn out. And so I practice the art of letting go. And I have found that the more I'm able to let go, in fact, the more I'm able to feel a sense of control. And I think it's one of the most difficult things for people to do, particularly for leaders, because there's a tremendous amount of pressure, there's a tremendous amount of stress, and there's an element of control, right, that's needed to manage one's environment. But I have found that it causes a lot of complications for leaders. And so I try to live by example, that none of us are perfect. We make mistakes. I think that we tend to create a story in our mind that's really rooted either in the past or in the future. I mentioned that I had a practice for 15 years. I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals, understanding the complexity of navigating a corporate environment, navigating a family environment, navigating a community environment. And there's no one out here and none among us who doesn't deal with some level of stress every day, right? And is learning how to take control, right, back of oneself. And the way to do that is to begin to try to let control grow a little bit at a time. You can't force that to happen. And that's a practice like anything else. None of us become good at anything, or certainly great at anything, unless we practice it. So we have to practice the discipline of being mindful, being aware, being present. I have found for me that a daily meditation practice, a daily yoga practice helps. Yoga just means union, right? It just means one, right? One with oneself, right? Not one with one's thoughts or one with one's doing or activity, right? And we are what's called, Len, human beings, right? We are beings. And if we can learn and discover the art of just being, right, I think it makes most of us very anxious, right? We want to know what's next. We're always on to what's next. And when we're on to what's next, we miss out what's now, right? What's happening right now, and all of the power is right now. And so that's my philosophy, if there is one. I will share a simple 5-point plan, okay? And so for all of the listeners out there, get your pens. This is a very sophisticated 5-point plan. I don't want you to miss out. The first point is love what you do, right? And that's very important. And the second is to do it well. The third is to do no harm. The fourth is do what you love and do it with love. The fifth is do it again.
Absolutely.
Very simple, very straightforward. And to do the right thing, right? The first, to do the right thing, do what you love, right? Do the right thing. what does that mean to do the right thing, right? It depends on the circumstance and situation, right? So do the right thing, do it well, do it with love, do no harm, and do it again.
Sola, really appreciate you being a guest today. Really terrific conversation. As I've gotten to know not only you, but your colleagues inside MLS, particularly working with Don, I know you have had a big impact on a lot of people, a lot of high-level executives, and a lot of work inside MLS. So you deserve credit for that. I know you're not going to take credit for that because that's not who you are, but you deserve a lot of credit for having a big, big impact in soccer here in North America. So thank you for all you do. And I just want to thank everybody else who has, taken some time to listen to us today, to really understand talent and how it plays itself out in the marketplace across the sports industry and beyond. Really appreciate you, Sola, and we'll talk soon.
Len, thank you, and thanks to everybody who tuned in to listen, and wishing you all a beautiful, bright, and blessed day, and much success in everything that you do. Be your best self in everything that you do, and trust that things will work out well. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Len. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.